What's going on, YouTube? Mr. Wheels here once again, welcoming you to another edition of Sports Talk. Tonight we're looking at Part 3 of the 2014-2015 NHL Season Preview, and this is a look at the Central Division. However, first, in the last two videos, I forgot to do a clear prediction on who I thought was going to win the Atlantic Division and who I thought was going to win the Metropolitan Division and where each team would finish in the in each divisional spot and the wild card. So I want to do that first, and before I do that, as always, I'd ask you to please like this video, please subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Sledgehead86 and like my Facebook fan page, Mr. Wheels86. The links will be in the description down below, and I will have you can hit the annotations for links to the other two videos in this mini-series. Now, a recap of the Eastern Conference, the two divisions, Atlantic and Metropolitan. In the Atlantic, I expect the Boston Bruins to finish first, Tampa Bay to finish second, ahead of Montreal. Even though Montreal may have a better goaltender in Carey Price, I think the fact that they've lost Brian Gionta, Daniel Briere, Josh Georges, I think that's going to hurt them. And Tampa Bay, with a healthy Steven Stamkos, I think can finish ahead of Montreal. And don't be surprised if Detroit sneaks up and takes that third divisional spot away from Montreal, because they haven't gotten worse, the Red Wings. So Montreal may find themselves finishing in the wild card spot. As for the Metropolitan Division, because of the changes they made on defense, I expect the Washington Capitals to potentially finish first in the Metropolitan Division. The Penguins will probably finish second because they lost Brooks Orpik and Matt Niskanen to the Capitals, and Chris Letang has some health issues, so there's some questions there. And the Rangers could take that second divisional spot away from the Penguins, so they could be finishing third. As for the wild card spot, it could be anyone from Detroit to Toronto. And out of the Metropolitan Division, I like the New York Islanders to possibly take a wild card playoff spot, but that's just my opinion. Let's get into a look at the Central Division now. Starting with the Chicago Blackhawks, they were 46, 21, and 15 last season, eventually losing in the third round to the LA Kings. Rallied from a 3-1 series deficit, took Game 7 into overtime, and were basically one shot away from going to a second consecutive Stanley Cup final. The only person they lost from last year's team was Brandon Bollig, and they added Mike Richards and Kyle Komeski, but I don't think that's going to make them good enough to go back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Mainly because there's a lot of teams in the Central Division that have added pieces to get better, and even though Chicago is my pick for winning the Central Division, I don't think they're going to have. They could be knocked out in the second round. But best case scenario, they probably lose again in the conference final. And that's not because I don't like Chicago. That's, seriously, that's what I think is going to happen. They do have depth now at center. Richards will take pressure off of Kane and Taves, but I think they still need to add pieces, possibly at the trade deadline this year or make a trade throughout the season to get better on the wing, more scoring, more leadership, whatever. Now let's move on to Colorado. They were 52, 22, and 8 last season. They lost in the first round of the Minnesota Wild. I think they were much better than anybody expected them to be. They overachieved, in my opinion, and they've lost some scoring. They've lost some guys that will hurt their depth scoring. Paul Stastny and P.A. Parenteau are gone, along with Matt Hunwick and Brad Malone. And they've still got Nate McKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog and Matt Duchene and all those guys. They added Jerome McGinley, Daniel Briere, Brad Stewart, Bruno Gervais, Zach Redmond, and Jesse Winchester. So they've added some experience that will help the younger guys, and they've added some grinders in there as well. Brad Stewart will help their defense a little bit. He's not a top 2 G-man by any means, but he's definitely top 4, and he'll help out a little bit. I could see Colorado finishing at best 3rd in the division, and they're definitely a playoff. I think they're definitely a playoff team, but they are not going to have as good a record as they did last season. 52 wins was definitely overachieving, and they gave up a lot of shots. And Semyon Varlamov, well, he is a good goaltender. I don't know how good he's going to be this year, and their defense to me is still questionable, but they should be a playoff team, definitely. Moving on to the Dallas Stars. They were 40, 31, and 11 last season, losing in the first round to Anaheim, and they gave Anaheim a bit of a scare. And now the Stars have some great center depth. They only lost Alex Chiasson, which was in a trade for Jason Spezza and Alex Hemsky. And they also added Anders Lindback from Tampa Bay. Now, the reason I like the addition of Spezza and Hemsky is because it gives the Stars a solid second line behind Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn. They are no longer a one-line team. Spezza and Hemsky will add some veteran experience and definitely gives them a solid second line. Where they do have questions is their defense. They've got some young defensemen that really need to have a breakout season, and if they can do that, their goaltending with Kari Lehtinen and Anders Lindback now, it's solid. But I think Kari Lehtinen is going to have to split the time with Lindback for them to be even more successful this season. And they should be a playoff team, or there's potential for them to be, definitely. I think they're better than some of the teams in the Central, so I'm going to say somehow they do get into the playoffs. I want to say it'll be probably through the wild card. At best, they would finish 3rd in the division, but it'll probably be through the wild card if they are to make the playoffs. Now let's move on to the Minnesota Wild. Now, I get all this information from NHL.com, and can you believe that they have Minnesota finishing in the playoffs, or going to the playoffs ahead of the Nashville Predators? And I will get to that in a minute, but Minnesota was 43, 27, and 12 last season, lost in the second round to Chicago. They surprised last season. They were better than I think a lot of people expected them to be. And they've lost, in my opinion, they've lost some key guys. Matt Molson is gone. Clayton Stoner, Cordy McCormick, Danny Heatley. Now, they do have some very good top 6 forwards with Miku Koivu and Zach Parise and Michael Granlund, and the list goes on. Their top 6 isn't going to be hurting at all, losing Matt Molson and Danny Heatley, but it's their defense. They have young defensemen, and their biggest question mark is in net. Darcy Kemper may end up being the starting goaltender because Nick Backstrom had health issues last season, and Josh Harding is obviously fighting MS, so there's always a question mark with him. I do not see Minnesota, even though they have great top 6 forwards, I do not see them making the playoffs this season. It's not going to happen. They are going to finish probably 5th or 6th in the division. They won't be dead last, but I'm going to say they finish probably 4th or 5th at best, mainly in large part because of their goaltending. Now, the reason I think Nashville is going to be better is because Pecorine, if he's healthy this year, he is a better goaltender than Darcy Kemper, Nick Backstrom, and Josh Harding combined. And that brings me to the Nashville Predators. They were 38, 32, and 12 last season. That was 6th in the Central Division. And it was in large part to Pecorine being hurt. And this prompted a coaching change. Barry Trotz, longtime coach, is gone. And Peter Laviolette is the new head coach. And it means that Nashville, they're going to go from a defensive style, hard-hitting defensive style, to a much more up-tempo, little bit more wide-open, finesse style of play. And they did lose some players. Patrick Hornquist and Nick Spalding are gone, but they added, but they traded Hornquist for James Neal. They picked up Olli Jokinen, Anton Volchenkov, Mike Rivero, and Derek Roy. And again, this is why I like Nashville over Minnesota, because they added pieces. They added more pieces than they lost, and they added scoring, depth on defense, and depth on forward. And I personally like the addition of Anton Volchenkov because you could put him with a guy like Shea Weber. You got Weber with his booming shot from the point, and Volchenkov is a shot block machine. They could be one heck of a pair. Or worst case scenario, Volchenkov will be a good addition to whoever the second pairing ends up being if Seth Jones ends up playing with Shea Weber. If Pecorine stays healthy, I expect Nashville to be right up there with the top 3 teams in the division. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. Because, while most teams in this division did get better, I think Nashville is one of the teams that improved the most. Now let's move on to St. Louis. They added Paul Stastny. They were 52, 23, and 7 last season. They lost in the first round to Chicago. Again, this is a team that I think they did a lot better than most people expected. They definitely finished a lot better than what I expected. 52 wins, that's huge. But they had a very disappointing playoff run, even adding Ryan Miller at the trade deadline. Ryan Miller is gone, along with Roman Polak, Vladimir Sobotka, Brendan Morrow, Derek Roy, and Adam Cracknell. And they added Paul Stastny, and then a whole bunch of guys that I've really never heard of. Jordy Lethera, I think is how you say that. I probably pronounced it wrong. Joachim Lindstrom, Carl Gunnarsson. They traded for Gunnarsson, and Roman Polak went to Toronto. Chris Butler, Nate Prosser, I think is how you say that. Peter Mueller, John McCarthy, Philip McRae, Ben Ferrero, and Jeremy Walsh were all added to the team. And really, a lot of those guys are just depth prospects. They're not really gonna make a huge impact this year. I wouldn't say. The other question mark for St. Louis is, without Ryan Miller, they're back to Brian Elliott starting in goal. That would be my first choice. In my opinion, they lost too many guys that helped them win last year, and they are another team that I do not see making the playoffs. And this is why I'm saying Nashville could be a dark horse in the Central Division, because teams like Minnesota and like St. Louis have taken a step back. Now let's move on to Winnipeg. They were 37, 35, and 10 last year. That was last in the Central Division, and they did not do enough to get better in the offseason. They're in the middle of a 7-year playoff drought, and I do not see that coming to an end. And that's between both being in Atlanta and the time that they've been in Winnipeg. They have not made the playoffs since the move to Winnipeg. They had a coaching change last year. Claude Noel was out, and Paul Maurice was in. That was a good thing. That is good news for the team. Paul Maurice at the helm for a full season. In my opinion, Claude Noel should have been gone before the end of last season. What the Jets are relying on is their youth. Guys like Jacob Trouba, Mark Scheifele, Evander Kane, Blake Wheeler, those are the guys that are really going to have to step up and have awesome seasons. They do have good goaltending in Andrei Pavlik. He has to be better. He had a goals against average over 3 last season. That wasn't good enough. They've lost Ole Jokinen and Al Montoya and Zach Redmond. But if their goaltending can be improved, who knows? They could surprise. I doubt they will because of the division they're in. If they were in the Eastern Conference, it might be a different story. But the Western Conference and the Central Division are just way too tough. I don't see them making the wild card because there's too many other teams that could do it. They did add Matthew Perreault, and he's probably just going to take over Ole Jokinen's minutes. But all that really does to me is take away from Anaheim's depth scoring, because and I will get to Anaheim in the next video, but Matthew Perreault was one of their young depth forwards, helped the team. Now he's on Winnipeg. He will help them, but not enough to help them get into the playoffs. And in my opinion, the Jets are still hurting from losing Alexander Burmistrov at the start of last season. So that does it for this video. Just to recap, I expect Chicago to finish first, and I'm going to say probably Colorado finishes second, and Dallas will take the third spot in the division. With the wild card, it's hard to say whether anybody else from the Central Division will make it into the playoffs, but definitely Chicago, Colorado, and Dallas are teams to keep an eye on out of this division. That's all I got, guys. Once again, as always, I'd ask you to please like this video, please subscribe to my channel, and give this video a share. I could really use the support. And you can follow me on Twitter at Sledgehead86, and like my Facebook fan page, Mr. Wheels86. I will see you.